Hello, we're all here for a quick dump. And keeping you company on the loo today is, of course, Sophie Medlin and Alana and I. We hope that our dulcet tones help you evacuate whatever you need to.
We hope also, if you are doing a number two, that your legs are raised so that you have your feet on a yellow pages, it's not 1999, or some sort of box elevated right angle.
Get into position. There's science on that, isn't there, that you should...
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
When you sit on the toilet with your legs at a right angle, it strangles one of your muscles that restricts your rectum.
Like a lasso.
Exactly. So if you sit with your knees up, that muscle is relaxed and pulls away, and then your rectum's properly open and you can have a proper poo.
A pool
Root,
lasso.
toot and get a toot.
Yes.
So we've spoke a bit before about gut issues. If you think you've got a gut issue, so you have signs, symptoms, red flag, who should you go to? Is it a GP? Is it a nutritionist? Is it someone like yourself, a dietitian? And how do you do it?
Yeah. So the first port of call would be your GP, and hopefully they would rule out anything that is worrying. So ideally, your GP will do a fecal calprotectin test, which measures inflammation in your stool.
What is that? What sort of
Just
test
a
is
poo
that?
sample, send it in, they'll get it sorted for you. So fecal calprotectin. Ideally, they'll do a blood test to rule out something like celiac disease. So there's two different blood tests for celiac disease. They need to do both of them.
And what's celiac disease?
Celiac disease is it's an autoimmune reaction to gluten. So I sometimes would want to call it an allergy. It's not quite an allergy. It's more like the gluten is toxic to your lining of your bowel. So it triggers an autoimmune reaction where your bowel starts attacking itself when there's gluten present. When you have no gluten at all, you're absolutely fine. So you want to do a fecal calprotectin. You want to check for TTG, IgA for celiac disease. And then I would want them to do a fit test. So checking for blood in the poo to check for bowel cancer. And lots of patients end up in my clinic being told they've got IBS, and then we send them right back again because there's something else going on there. And I think that's important that people know what test doctors should really be doing. Ideally, they also want to be checking inflammation in the blood and just making sure that's all okay and that you're not anemic and things like that. So once all of those sorts of things have been done, or if you're having trouble getting those things done, we as dietitians can support you with that. You want to think about seeing a dietitian. So any medical problems you need a dietitian for. Nutritionists are amazing and they do amazing work, but not all of them are regulated. So not all of them, basically anyone can call themselves a nutritionist, which makes it tricky. But also they've not got any medical training or education.
It's not clinical.
It's not a clinical role at all. So you need a dietitian, and ideally a specialist dietitian, because there's some dietitians who will claim to be an expert in everything, when in reality the gut is a pretty unique organ that needs
Big
a lot
old
of
bit of
education.
kit.
It really is. It's a complicated bit of kit, and you need lots of experience to be able to handle it properly. So yeah, you want a specialist colorectal or gastroenterology dietitian if you've got a gut health problem.
And one question just popped to mind there. IBS and IBD. I think most people have heard of IBS, but what are the differences between IBS and IBD?
Yeah. IBS stands for irritable bowel syndrome, and it's essentially what we consider now a gut-brain axis.
Yeah, it's just been
disorder.
reclassified, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. So it's to do with the microbiome and changes to the microbiome, usually triggered by things like food poisoning, gastroenteritis, periods of acute or chronic stress. Those sorts of things can trigger problems with the gut bacteria, or changes to the gut bacteria that are less favourable to your gut function, and that then also is perpetuated by our brain. So your mind can make those symptoms worse, and that's not to say in any way that it's all in your head or I'll just calm down and it'll go away.
The opposite
It's
of that,
chemical changes, physical and chemical changes that occur when we're stressed and anxious that then impact our gut. So it's not something we can just easily switch off and control. So that's IBS. Inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, encompasses things like Crohn's disease and colitis or ulcerative colitis. And that is a potentially life-threatening autoimmune disease category that we really need to take very seriously. And it's very easy to differentiate clinically between IBS and IBD unless you're not very experienced or you've not had any medical training. So it's really important that you see the right person. And one of the things that is part of my role in clinic is to take people who've been told they've got IBS and figure out if it definitely is IBS or if there's something else going on there. And that doesn't involve any of the expensive commercial tests that people will have seen. It involves me sending you back to GP for some more tests most of the time.
And that's why a lot of the time it is important to speak to a human, isn't it? Because gut health is so multifactorial and it affects so much different things, so many different things. And a lot of the time, and it's different day to day, different in each person. And for something like IBS, that is usually a collection of symptoms, isn't it? And, I think the internet would like to bucket our gut issues into lots of things with names that they can then sell things off the back on, like SIBO, Candida, leaky gut, all of these things, when actually a lot of the time, there's a lot of different things going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And SIBO can be a symptom of constipation, or it can be caused by a multitude of other things that are going on. It's actually a fairly rare diagnosis, and we don't really know. All three of us could be positive for SIBO, but none of us have symptoms, for example. So it's a difficult thing to diagnose and manage correctly and effectively. Leaky gut isn't really a condition that we recognise medically yet. Maybe it will be one day, but it's not something that is considered to be an accurate diagnosis at this stage. But yeah, the internet wants to diagnose everybody with everything so they can sell you all the cures. Parasites, another one. But we need to be careful of that, because ultimately seeing a dietitian will help you to get the right diagnosis that can help you on a treatment path to get things sorted.
And I think determining what is when we get our head around like gut issues, it's like there's the actual physical mechanics of how things are working or not. And then also the microbiome, which all different bacteria can affect things actually more largely than we thought historically.
Absolutely.
And knew about, really.
Yeah, totally. And the microbiome is like a continuously changing and evolving science, and it's amazing. And what we learn more and more is how much it impacts our day-to-day symptoms and our gut function. One of the things that's tricky is that all the gut health programs, products, all of these types of things that people are drawn to, often people who live with IBS symptoms or who have a microbiome that's a bit compromised will end up having symptoms when they try and eat the foods that they're recommended to include, or some of the ingredients that are added to like gut health products. And that's really problematic, and it's really difficult for people to differentiate between, is this for me or not for me? And we see so many patients off the back of doing programs where they've been told to eat loads of different things, and we say, yeah, that's healthy for normal people, well, not normal people. That's healthy generally, but for you, it's going to make your symptoms worse, and we have to unpack all of that, and it can be quite hard work for people.
And that's why it's so important when we were developing the new 100 Days to Hack Your Gut Health program. There's one stream of people that are looking for gut health for well-being, and there's another stream to gut issues where we then refer you to your clinic.
Yeah.
Because it's so important, because it is so personalised.
And these people are so vulnerable, like they're looking for answers.
They're desperate, yeah.
So when people come to your clinic or they have a session with you, I think I really underestimated, because I've not suffered with symptoms or an issue. I know certainly when we were filming the TV show, people were really nervous to come and speak to you. And obviously when you meet you, you're so easy to talk to and
She
so
doesn't
open.
bite.
But I was really surprised at how nervous people were. Can you just talk us through exactly what happens in a one-to-one? Because I think people are like, I don't want to say what my poo is. I don't want to say what I'm eating in case, there's shame or embarrassment. But what actually happens when someone books a one-to-one or appointment with you?
Yeah. And just to touch on that, Alana, I think one of the things that both of you were struck by on the show was how debilitating these things are for people, and how much it impacts people's quality of life and their enjoyment of life. And one of the things I say is everyone takes their rectum for granted until it goes wrong, right? Everyone takes their colon for granted until it goes wrong. So if someone comes to see me, they can book online or they can call up and get booked in, whichever way they prefer. And they can send me some information beforehand, but they don't have to. And sometimes I think some people want to, and that's great. But some people don't want to fill in a food diary and do all these things because it feels difficult until they've met somebody. And I totally understand that. So initially, we would go through what's going on for them. It's part of my clinical assessment. So what's the history of the problem? What's been going on? How long has it been going on for? What's the most significant thing? What are some of the other things that are going on? I'm rooting around to find the diagnosis in this department. So I'm looking for all of the questions I need answered. And sometimes I might ask questions that people think aren't related. Do you ever get headaches? Do you ever get rashes? Do you ever get any of these other things that people might not think to tell me because they may not think they're related to their gut? So we'd explore all of their current symptoms, whatever they might be, as well as any past medical history, any medications that they're taking or have taken. Have they done anything that's helped the problem or made it worse? All of those things. So trying to unpack everything. Obviously, we'd look at their current bowel habit, what used to be normal for them and what's happening now. Sometimes people will have like a good day with their bowel and sometimes they'll have a bad day. What do those 2 days look like and how are they different? talk about the colour, smell, what the sort of consistency is, all of these things around their poo. Loads of questions they've probably never been asked before, even if they've been to the doctor 10 times asking about their bowel
And you
problem.
hear about this all day, every day.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
aren't embarrassed, or no one should
No.
feel embarrassed in front of you. It's literally what you talk about all day, every
Yeah,
day.
yeah. And I think sometimes I can see that someone's still really anxious telling me about them things. And sometimes people say, oh, I know this is disgusting, or this is TMI. And I'm like, no, literally, the more information, the better. And I'll say things like, I know it's really uncomfortable to talk about, but if you could share with me something about this, that would be really helpful to help me to understand and find a diagnosis for you. So we, as dietitians, we're trained highly in communication skills, and I like to think I'm naturally a good communicator as well. And so
Correct.
we're good at tailoring our language and our the way that we approach people to what we can see is happening for them in that moment. And all of my clinics are virtual now, which is nice because people can see me from all over the country. But equally, even over Zoom, you can see when someone's like, oh, I really don't want to tell you that, or they are comfortable sharing what's going on, and some people are and some people aren't. So we would do that. The other thing that we do is an environmental assessment, which for me includes how's your sleep, because gut health and sleep are very closely connected. Talk to me about stress, very important, very big for your gut health. And then exercise, you're doing loads of exercise or not very much exercise. And I think that's one of the questions that people sometimes feel uncomfortable with, because I need to know if you're someone who's running marathons or going to the gym every day, or if you're not someone who's enjoying exercise at the moment. Either way is absolutely fine, but I need to know that to estimate your nutritional requirements and see what's going on from your diet history. Exercise and gut health also very closely linked, so really important to understand. We would then look at your diet. So again, some people do feel a bit embarrassed to share with me what they're eating, and they say things like, oh, I know it's really bad, but sometimes I eat biscuits and cakes, and I'm like, yeah, me too, it's not bad, it's fine. And we just sort of explore all the things that they're eating. And that's the way that I do that, and different dietitians will do it differently, is just to talk to me about what a typical day looks like. I'm interested in what time you're eating, how long you're leaving between meals, whether you're having snacks or not having snacks, because those can play a role in what's going on with your gut function. I want to talk about I want to understand how much fruits and vegetables you're eating. And then obviously I will also try and match that to your symptoms. So I would look at that, and then I go, well, you're eating a lot of fermentable carbohydrates and you've got bloating and diarrhea. Maybe it's because you've got too many FODMAPs, which are fermentable carbohydrates, in your diet, and we can modify that. Maybe it's that your symptoms, you haven't got very many FODMAPs and there must be something else going on. So we would estimate sort of the nutritional intake in terms of protein, carbohydrates, that kind of thing, but also any common triggers that you're consuming regularly that could be causing your bowel symptoms. Obviously, I want to understand about people's weight, and if you've lost weight or if your weight's stable, all of those kinds of things. And yeah, all of those things kind of come together to help me to form a diagnosis of what's going on. And 90% of the time I'm like, yeah, it's definitely this, let's explore this. And sometimes I'm like, do you know what? This has been going on for a long time. You've tried lots of different things before. Let's try this first. And if that doesn't work, I can't promise you that's going to be the right answer, but let's explore this first. Then we can explore this. Then we can explore this. And, almost always we can get to the bottom of what's going on.
I think a lot of the time as well, people just don't have the vocabulary when it comes to gut health and talking about it. I think when, in the doctor's form, when it says units of alcohol,
Yeah.
It's like 2 glasses of wine. Or is it my
but
own
it's
measure?
a metric that we're familiar with.
Yeah.
Whereas, when you're talking about stool samples, colours of stools, blah, blah, it's not something that people will have tuned into or probably spoken about before. So it's like a vocabulary thing. And I think secondly, another thing that we've noticed is the weight that is lifted from people, and actually sometimes symptom improvement just by saying it out loud.
And being heard, I
Yeah.
think. So one of the things that patients say to me often is, no one's ever asked me that many questions about it before. No one's ever asked me all of the things that you asked me. And I feel like you've really understood what's going on. And that's such an important thing, not just for clinically for me to be able to make a diagnosis, but also so that they feel heard and listened to. We have an hour in on initial consultations, which I think is really important because people need time. They need time, needs to be heard. And sometimes, people don't think to tell you something until the last minute. And you're like, oh, right, okay, well, that changes everything. But equally, people can take, one of the things that, we talked about before, but is fecal incontinence. And I think it can be difficult for people to share that. And, if there is any clinicians listening, I think it's important to ask those direct questions, because people won't necessarily disclose unless they're asked specifically. They're unlikely to lie, but they are likely to feel too embarrassed to tell you if it is a problem for them.
Okay, so we've given you an extra 3 minutes to get your poo out, or an extra couple of minutes to get your poo out on that one. But I think it's important, to say it perfectly, to give you the time.
Be thorough.
Be thorough.